This episode is for Mr. Charlie Kirk, for his courage, for his witness to Christ, for his family, Erica, his wife, and his children, and for all of those around the world praying that we may find our way to understanding and peace through our Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. We're going to start with a prayer. God is our refuge and our strength, help when afflictions are heavy upon us. Thus we fear not when the earth is changed and mountains fall into the heart of the sea. They rage and boil, the waters thereof. Mountains shake with the surging thereof. A river, its streams joy the city of God, the sacred place of the Most High dwelling. God in her midst, she is not moved. God helpeth her early, in gray morning tide. Nations have raged and kingdoms have fallen. He sendeth his voice, earth melteth away. The Lord of hosts, he standeth beside us, the God of Jacob, a fortress to us. Come ye and see the works of the Lord, what wonders he placed upon the earth, making wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaketh the bow, and rendeth the spear, and burneth the chariot in flames of fire. Be still, and know that I am God. I am exalted above the nations, I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts, he standeth beside us, the God of Jacob, a fortress to us. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. This is a solemn episode. We had actually planned for this episode some weeks ago. It was going to be after Based Con and our new friend, Robert, whom I found on Substack. And here we are on September 12th, 2025. And just a reflection to start with that I remember September 12th, 2001 incredibly well, as many of you probably do. And the irony of that day for me was the day before, September 11th, which we have also remembered this week. I was literally that day finishing the acknowledgments to my first book that I was supposed to send off to the publisher on September 12th. And there were no planes flying on September 12th, 2001. And the main thought I had when the skies were completely quiet, it was a beautiful, beautiful September day in Chicago, and there was no noise at all because all of the planes were grounded. And that I was so thankful that I had been given the work that I had to be in this moment and be praying with our Lord Jesus Christ for understanding of what just happened. And I'm taking it as a guide that we had already scheduled with Robert to come on and talk about his work on the Psalms, which he may tell you a little bit and helped by me. And I think these things come together as they are meant to, because we've been working in prayer. We've been working on Psalms. We think about God in our regular practice. And it's days like this that you know why. So, Robert, we are very, very happy to have you on this episode, and to some extent to celebrate our Lord, but also to help us understand why we say the prayers that we do. So, welcome to the Mosaic Ark.
Thank you
And
very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
so I'll say I found Robert on Substack because he has a wonderful, lovely Substack that he's been running 2 or 3 years now. Yes.
No, just a little over 1 year.
Okay. Oh, well, it seems richer and longer than that. Which I'm so jealous of you on so many levels because you got a really great title for it. It's Via Medievalis, and and you guys, you're just going to have to tell me how it is that you came up with this great title, because you say that what you're doing in your Substack, and which I've learned that you're also doing in well, your dissertation, which you may or may not want to tell us about right now, but in the prayer book that I was reading from at the beginning, right, that this is your prayer, sacred poetry for family prayer, and that this, so I see what you're doing is a rich and multi-layered project of bringing medieval spirituality to the postmodern world, at which point I had my suspicions. So I will say you have marvelous epigraphs in this book. Let's see, there's an opening one. I'm going to embarrass him now. There's an opening one from Richard Roll of Hampole, which is very appropriate. Great abundance of ghostly comfort and joy in God comes in the hearts of them that say or sing devoutly the Psalms in loving of Jesus Christ. But then the second one, I'm not sure that she deserves to be up there, up with Richard Roll. This Dr. Rachel Fulton Brown.
Now, before you praise me for this work, keep in mind that look how unprofessional this is. I actually copied and pasted a course description from one of your classes as an epigraph to my book, which is don't tell my professor friends that I did this.
Hey, you
But
credited me. I think
I
this.
know, but it fits so perfectly. I just said I'm going to use this. I'm sorry. I know this is not very professional, but I'm going to do it anyway because it just was exactly what I needed.
So what we find is that we're actually on the same path already, and that you
Yes,
found me before I knew you. So
absolutely correct.
I'm honored and just delighted that you're here to help us think. So if you could say a little bit about it yourself, and that's my introduction for you. But how you came to be on this via, on this path, and there's a very interesting image out there of you holding a scythe. So I think there's
There
more
is.
there's more backstory here that we need to know a little bit about.
Yeah, there's a very long backstory that I will have to abbreviate, but yeah, the Via Medievalis, the medieval way, entered my life really long before I was kind of a serious scholar, in the realm of literature, poetry, or um, cultural history, or any such thing. It was really just my desire to live a more traditional and agrarian life.
Mm.
And I had worked for a few years in corporate America after graduating with my bachelor's. And it took me a couple years to realize that I absolutely hated corporate life and corporate work. And I think, my situation was particularly damaging to my psyche. And I eventually had to stop working that job. And then I, kind of was forced to embark on a journey of healing and recovery from that experience. And what it became was a journey into traditional rural life.
Mm.
And I grew up in the suburbs and lived a very normal suburban life as a child and a teenager. So this was all completely new to me. But I had this deep urge, this deep need to reconnect with the elemental forces and realities of human life. This fear of becoming like assimilated into the technological world that I had been working in for a few years.
Mm.
And so I just immersed myself in this sort of pre-technological, non-technological life to the extent that I could. And in the process of doing that, I sort of inevitably became acquainted with and exposed to essentially medieval peasant life,
Mm.
European, pre-modern European peasant life. And I'm just the sort of person who wants to go deeper and deeper into something once he sort of has a taste of it and he likes it. And so in contrast with a lot of other people who are kind of going back to the land and starting hobby farms and things like this, and sort of trying to reconcile their city job with their pseudo agricultural life or something, I wanted as much of the traditional European agrarian life that as I could possibly get. So I went deeper and deeper into non-technological ways of working the land, non-technological ways of managing a home, traditional ways of preparing and eating food. And so this was really the seed, or the entire seed bed for Via Medievalis. After living this life for a while, it became apparent that I didn't feel that I was really called to just become, like a famous peasant farmer or something, if such a thing is possible.
You're not going to be Pierce Plowman. We're disappointed.
I I think that I would like to be. I think I was physically incapable of it, to be honest with you. I've never been very physically vigorous, and health problems just started sort of slowing me down. So I said, well, I guess I need to go back to using my mind more, which is sort of how I started my professional life. So I then embarked more on this sort of scholarly path that I'm on now. But these things eventually were harmonious in my life. These experiences pursuing European agrarian lifestyles were something that I could reconcile with my work as a scholar and as an educator. And Via Medievalis is the fruit of this, is the fruit of trying to engage both literary scholarship, cultural scholarship, historical scholarship, and simultaneously the soul expanding experience of being in contact with the land and with the agrarian and village traditions of pre-modern European life.
How did you learn those? Did you apprentice with somebody? How does one become a peasant farmer from medieval
Yeah, it was
Europe? How do you learn?
it was surprisingly difficult. Um, it turns
Or
out that
not?
getting a bachelor's degree is in some ways a lot simpler than learning how to become a peasant farmer. Um,
I mean, there's knowledge that is not carried in books. Say not so.
Absolutely, absolutely. There are a few things left that are not on the internet. Um, so I mean, a lot of it, yeah. I mean, I did read books, and I did sort of search around on blogs and things to see what other people were doing. But I very much reached, kind of a brick wall. There was a point at which I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. I felt unable to sort of progress to the next level of self-sufficiency or of non-technological agriculture. And so you're going to start to get the impression here that I'm a little bit of a radical. I tend to go too far with things.
Well,
So
right now, what I learned is you're going deep, deep, deep into grammar. So we could
yeah,
that's good.
yeah. And so I said, well, I can't learn these things on the internet, and I can't learn them from books. So I'm going to have to go someplace where they're still known and still
Mm.
practiced. So I bought my plane ticket to northern Romania. And for 6 months, I lived in a village in Romania where people still live a fairly traditional life, where they still practice non-technological farming in a variety of ways, where they still have some connection to pre-modern European life. And I lived amongst those people for 6 months and learned everything that I could about their mentalities, about their agricultural practices, about the structure of their homes and societies, about their uh, methods of integrating religion into their lives. And
What did they make
so
of
that was
you?
my
I mean,
apprenticeship.
you couldn't if they it did you write to them before you showed up?
I had a connection.
Oh,
I
okay.
knew a photographer. I knew an American photographer who had done some photographic work in this village. So
Okay.
that was my connection. So she helped me to get in contact with with one of the families there, and then one of the families arranged a housing situation for me and kind of helped me to get settled. But that was really where I've always had an aptitude for language and for learning languages, but that was where the rubber hit the road, so to speak, because there were really no English speakers in that village. So I studied Romanian for about 6 months before I got there, and then when I got there, I realized that 6 months was not long enough, um, and I learned quickly to communicate in whatever way I possibly could. So the host family, or not a host family, but the family helped me to kind of get settled, but I was mostly on my own, especially with the language.
Mm.
And they looked at me, I think, maybe like a prophet from the future, like someone who had traveled back in time to warn them about their destiny or something. I don't honestly know what they made of me, but they liked me. I'm a pretty friendly guy, so we got along pretty well, and they were sad when I left.
So I have to. This was not where I thought we were going, but now I say that on the one hand, that you weren't obviously by yourself. You were in a village, which is the first step of understanding what we mean when we're talking about living the medieval life. It's like you're in a village,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
and that you're dependent on all of the people in the village in very deep ways to be able to
Deep, deep. Oh yeah,
stay alive at all.
absolutely.
And second, my first fencing coach was Romanian, but he was from Hungarian Romania. So you the story would have. I wonder how different it would have been if you'd had to be learning Hungarian instead of Romanian. Anyway,
Actually, it was quite fascinating because I lived in a village, and these villages are kind of arranged like satellites around a larger town.
mm,
The larger town was a Hungarian town.
got it.
Oh,
So when I went to town, people were speaking Hungarian. At that point, I was utterly hopelessly lost. Um,
is that a
so it
harder
was.
language than Romanian?
Oh, it's notorious for being one of the hardest languages on earth to learn.
Oh, wow. Did
Right.
not know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and the fencing community in the States is all filled with Eastern Europeans, of Hungarians and
Oh, really?
Romanians, and so yeah, my coach now is former Soviet from Kazakhstan, and yeah, so anyway, it's a that we intersect in lots of strange ways in these parts of the world that we think are very far away, and in fact they're tied to us in ways that we should have you back on to talk about. Let's talk about the Psalms this time.
Okay.
So, so as part of your project, you did this lovely translation, which you published as Sacred Poetry for Family Prayer. But you say but you wanted to make sure to caution everyone. This is, although you can buy it on Amazon, and we will have the link for everyone. It's a work in progress, and I'd love to hear you talk a bit about like putting together this book itself, although it is mainly the Psalms, mainly a translation of the Psalms. But I'm very, very attracted to what you're doing because you're consciously doing it as poetry as well. So it's not just prayer, but it's your linguistic um uh richness of your linguistic training that you're also bringing to thinking about the prayers, and that's what we're actually here to talk about tonight, not farming. But the thing is, the farming, I think, is what you've said about how you dive into the physical world. I think, from my perspective, is obviously what's giving you such rich understanding of the imagery in the Psalms themselves, because
Yes.
they're
Yes.
so incarnate. They're
Yes.
so physically real. Anyway, so just
Absolutely.
just introduce people a little bit to the book itself, and so manage their expectations for what they're getting if they buy it.
Yeah, well, like you said, I consider it a work in progress, not because it's unfinished or unusable in its current state. It's very usable. I use it every day in its
Hmm.
current state. My whole family does. Um, but because something this important has to kind of be as good as it can possibly be. So as I use this, I'm always very mindful of how I might improve it. And it's the sort of thing, when I first created this translation, I mean, I'm reading it myself. I'm looking at a computer screen.
Mm.
You can't really perfect or even come close to perfecting something in that environment, in those circumstances. It has to be something that you are actually using and experiencing in a communal setting, actually singing the Psalms, actually reciting the Psalms, hearing how children recite them, hearing the way that different words do or do not have the effect that you want when you hear them in a communal setting or when you hear them chanted or whatever. So I'm always trying to kind of create this feedback loop where my experience actually using these prayers in the setting of a family, of a very normal family composed of children with a wide range of ages. I'm always creating this feedback loop and trying to see how can I make this something that people will actually use.
Right.
This is this really is, I mean, this is obviously not a get rich quick scheme. Like I don't expect to become rich and famous because of this book. Like I wrote this because I really, really want families to be able to pray the Psalms in a way that is emotionally moving, in a way that is beautiful, in a way that is linguistically and poetically satisfying. And that's why I've created this translation. But I don't feel like it's as good as it could reasonably be yet because of what I just said, because of the need to actually experience this in a realistic, repetitive setting where you're praying these psalms over and over and over again, and then starting to notice all the little things that you don't notice when you're first translating them or first revising them or something like that. So that's the caveat about the hope that this will be even better once I have some more time to go back and make revisions and publish another edition of it.
Well,
But anyway,
if you keep going, you'll be like Jerome and end up with 3.
yeah, I know. See, Jerome
No.
wasn't satisfied either. You see what happens. You're never
It sounds like a
satisfied.
challenge.
The Jerome Psalms challenge, right? He did 3, right? The Gallicanum, the Romanum, and the Hebraicum, and he
Yeah,
probably would have kept going. So the experience of translating the Psalms. I mean, you're starting from. I mean, you mentioned in your introduction that we've got lots of translations of the Psalms. So the why did you feel like I mean, what drew you to trying again, as it were?
well, I kind of explained this in the introduction, is that there are so many translations of the Psalms.
It's an English
But
tradition to translate the
it, it
Psalms.
absolutely it absolutely is. It's an English literary tradition to translate the Psalms.
Yes. If you want to be
Um,
this is our cautionary tale to those. If you want to be a scholar of English literature, you must translate the Psalms.
right, instead of like having to compose a sonnet sequence like in the Renaissance,
Exactly.
you have to compose a new translation of the Psalms. Um, but the I really to make it very simple is that I wanted to pray the Psalms in English because despite my efforts, I've not really been able to teach my children how to read Latin very well. So
Oh,
I,
yes.
I wanted
Footnote, he also has an ongoing series on Via Medievalis of Latin grammar. So guys, if you want it, we have a lot of homeschoolers in our own little online various version of community. You're giving them so much joy right now, resources that will give them more materials to work with their children on.
my children have to read those learning liturgical Latin lessons, by the way. So they're involved in this process, and your children can be too.
Very good.
Um, but yeah, so the bottom line here, quite simply, is that I wanted to pray the Psalms in English with my family, and there was no translation in existence that I found satisfactory. The closest one was the Geneva Bible translation, which happens to be the Bible that Shakespeare read. I could almost tolerate the Geneva Bible translation, but there were still way too many passages that just felt clunky
Mm.
or felt hopelessly archaic or outdated. There was no attention to meter. There was no attempt to really give poetic form to the Psalms. And I said, I just can't do this anymore. I can't keep praying these Psalms because the fact is they're just too inartistic. The Geneva Bible is a very vigorous translation, and I like the sort of uh, intense, sort of trenchant language, but still, it's not a poetic experience, a musical experience in the way that I wanted it to be. So I said, well, my only option here is to do it myself because no one else has done it, so I'm going to do it myself. Once again, you see that I'm kind of a radical and do crazy things.
Well,
Um,
indeed, but I think you'll find sympathies among other the people. And so you talk in the introduction about your practice, and this is obviously we in Mosaic Ark, we of the Dragon Common Room, are obsessed with iambic pentameter. So there you
yes,
go.
that's good. That's a good thing.
And so we've spent the last 5 years writing less lofty verse than the Psalms, but stories in iambic pentameter, and therefore we are highly sympathetic to the desire to write English in iambs. That's one thing. But you also talk about how you've chosen the vocabulary that you do, and this it comes at the end with a glossary of archaic words and usages. You had the best defense of archaisms that I've ever seen. Right. thing. The archaic diction is part of my attempt to maintain the forceful elemental coloration of medieval English, and I've strenuously sought to employ it in a judicious, poetically sound, and intellectually stimulating manner. Guys, he achieves it, so there you go. But what I enjoyed about your translation is you could say I suspect one of the things people are worried about, you say, well, it's a new translation, so it's going to end up sounding like, I don't know, Good News Bible or something, right? That it's all accessible language, and that's not what you've done at all.
Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, just the way you described that, I'm glad to hear it's not that. So
No, it's not that at all.
look
Not
forward to
only is
reading
it
something
not
else that
only
was
is it in
better.
iams, it's forceful and elemental.
Yeah, because I think people hear accessible and they get, yeah, the red flags go, "Oh." They get a little bit freaked out by that, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as you can probably sense from this book, like language is kind of my theory of everything. Like everything is rooted in language for me. And I'm a Catholic. The medieval era in European history is for me the age of faith. This is the age when Christianity was in its state of fulfillment, its state of full maturation, its state of unity and coherence. And I do not believe that a translation of the Psalms can reach its full potential if it's still sort of locked in this post-Reformation King James Bible, Geneva Bible mode of expression. And now I did rely heavily on a sort of King James Bible aesthetic because that's what people are comfortable with, that's what people can understand. But what I said is that I'm going to bring as much medieval language, as much medieval style into this translation as I reasonably can, because medieval culture is for me the culture of Christianity's fulfillment, the culture of Christianity's perfection in kind of the old sense of the word. It's completion, its state of full maturity. And so I don't believe that we can derive the full beauty and spiritual effect from the Psalms when the language is so tied into the culture of the Reformation, the culture of the English Reformation. So I said, well, I need to make this translation more medieval, not just because I like to go to medieval fairs and dress up or something, but because
Do you do
medieval
that?
England,
Do you go to medieval fairs?
I actually don't. I've never been to a Renaissance fair, which I probably should not admit that. I should.
Well,
I-
I think you can come up one day.
I'd like to,
we can
but
go to the Bristol Renaissance Fair, and you can I'll bring smelling salts so that when you faint.
Are you saying they're
From the
bad?
northern
Are you saying
history?
they're not good?
Oh well, Michael Camille, my former colleague at University of Chicago, loved them. Right? I mean, maybe it's medieval times, right? The sort of the medieval as
Oh.
performative. It has its moments.
It has its moments. That's kind of what I assumed. Yeah. But anyway, so it's not just about kind of playing medieval dress-up games with the language. It's
Right.
about trying to tap into the intensity, the fullness, the depth, the richness of the Catholic religion, of the Christian religion as it existed in the Middle Ages. Because again, I don't think that you can separate these things from language.
It's a good point that I think a lot of people just take for granted, that a lot of Christians take for granted in this country, that the King James version, the translation, is the most beautiful translation that there is. And I think they're talking just about, well, maybe I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about. It's just, it's an old fashioned language, so it sounds more sacred. But can you say what might be a difference, just like a small example, the difference between a Reformation era language or meaning versus a medieval one?
Well,
What would be
it
the
is kind of
main
hard to
difference?
encapsulate, but like if we spend a little time reading the Psalms as translated by Richard Rolle, you would get a very clear feeling for it. I mean, one is just the diction. One is the lexicon. We're dealing with Middle English, and so you have a number of words that have really kind of fallen out of the language by the time you get to the late 16th century, the early 17th century. So there are some words there, like the one of the ones that I incorporate into my translation is theod, which I just think is a very sonically intense word. I think that it really brings up some of these old medieval Anglo-Saxon energies, and that's a word that you don't find in Reformation literature. post-Reformation literature. So there
So
are a
what
number
everybody
of
just
words.
heard is the name of the character in Lord of the Rings. You need to tell us.
Theoden. Yeah.
I was actually wondering if people would be more sympathetic to my use of the word because it sounds like the name of the king in Lord of the Rings. But I assume that Tolkien took that name from this word. I'm actually not
Oh, he
sure.
totally did. No,
He totally did.
I-
Okay.
What does the word?
Yeah,
What
see,
does it
that's-
mean?
what does it mean?
I don't know what it means. I'm sorry.
Theod
I don't
Theod
have the book.
is an old English and Middle English word that means basically people, like a people as in a nation or a
Oh, okay.
So this is so we
That's
don't
a
we
very
don't want
sounding
we don't
word.
want Christian nationalism. We want Christian Theoden.
You need to bring back the medieval words.
Theodism?
Yes, we need to bring back the medieval word. So this is also, since when we write poetry, and that sometimes it's you put in soth, truly indeed, simply because you said sometimes it scans better, and I'm like, yeah, I get. Oh, wait, we're gonna use that. But other ones are less strange. Veld as field, vain as empty. I think Theod is of the choices you made for strangeness or archaism, it's the strongest.
That's one of the strongest. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just when I was working with Roll's translation, that was a big part of this project, was trying to incorporate Richard Roll's use of language. He was a kind of late medieval mystical writer in England. I was trying to incorporate his style and his use of language in the translation. That you can only do so much because it's Middle English. It's not really accessible for a typical modern reader. But he used the word folk, FOLK,
Right.
instead of people. And again, this is me going off on my language, kind of like fanatical language details that other people would never think about. But people is a very Latinate word. It doesn't evoke this elemental medieval Anglo-Saxon energy the way that I want it to. And people, this word is used very frequently in the psalm, so it kind of becomes like a motif. It's just people, 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 people. And again, this is a Latinate word that
Populi.
to
It's
me,
the vox populi.
yeah,
It's
comes from the word populus in Latin. And so I was looking at Richard Roll's translation, and he uses this word folk, which was, again, it had more of this medieval flair for me, but I couldn't use that word because I found it too distracting. So I just got another medieval word that was another alternative to people, and then started using that, not every single time, but enough so that it imparts some of that medieval aesthetic, that medieval sonic aesthetic into the translation.
I had another thought while you were talking. I've forgotten it. You talk about, it's still in the introduction, guys. The first psalm that I read at the opening of this episode was Robert's translation, so you could already have some of that in your head. Pointing out that the poetry says things that prose doesn't. And I think that's what I was thinking. That one of the reasons that we started writing iambic pentameter, which we've been using, we've read. You like Edmund Spenser more than we do, I think. Or maybe you understand him when we still don't, right? But trying to write in the mode of literature that we get from the later Middle Ages or the 16th century, much as Tolkien said he did, is because nobody's writing the kinds of things I like, right? So that there is some certain kinds of things that you can say in poetry that you cannot say in prose, and we've learned this in writing our own poems, that it's very dense, it's very self-referential. It's the kinds of metaphors and figures of speech you can do, but I have found often when we're putting together a stanza, the meaning is only is there because it's in meter and rhyme, and at some point I think you say something in one of the notes about, is it Aristotle saying if it's in meter you can stop hearing the sense, that people will just catch the rhythm so much that it will no longer be meaning in that say. But there is a way in which it's bound, right? We can't read the Bible anymore because we think of it as a novel or something like that, when in fact a third of it is poetry.
1/3 of it is poetry,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I think that this is one of my major themes just in my life and in my teaching and the scholarship that I do, is that we have this very powerful tendency in modern, postmodern culture to associate language with denotative meaning, with just the bare semantic reality of language. And what I try to convey to people is that there is meaning in the poetry. There is meaning in the sound. There's meaning in the rhythm. There's
Right.
meaning in the rhyme. And is it a different type of meaning? I guess to some extent that it is. And I think in some ways it's the more important type. And not to say that we can just, have random assemblages of words and make them deeply meaningful and enlightening and edifying because they have rhythm or because they have imagery or because they have alliteration. But to be quite honest, one of the Psalms, as I comment in the notes, almost is like that. As scholars look at this thing and they're just lost because it doesn't seem to have any clear semantic flow. On the level of basic denotation, it seems to be a failure. But when you read this poem, when you read this psalm, you know, in a translation like mine, of course, I'm completely biased, but I find the non-poetic translations to fall short, especially in situations like this. But when you read a translation like mine that is metrical and that is really focused on the poetic aspects of the language, you see that the obscurity, the incoherence on the raw semantic level is not a major impediment to a profound experience with this inspired poem.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to rediscover this awareness of poetic language as meaningful in a way that prosaic language cannot be.
We Casey, I'm just waiting for you in case you have something.
No, I do have something to
Okay.
say. As you were describing that, it reminds me of something we've been saying, not literally, but we like to say that English is, especially poetry, is a magic language. It seems to be. It's just, there's something different about it. When you put things in a poetic meter, you can joke and say it sounds like an incantation, but I think what's really going on there is you're picking up the meaning with the words and the meter and the rhyme all together. It seems to translate. It seems to communicate something entirely new that is more than just a collection of the words and an idea that somebody had to write about, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the articles that I wrote for my Substack is called "The First Language of the Soul."
Mm.
It was an exploration of this idea that the soul basically speaks poetry. If the soul could communicate without the mediation of the body, it would actually be speaking in poetry or maybe even singing.
Oh, beautiful.
And so when we feel this sort of enchantment effect deriving from poetry, when we feel that poetry seems to be beguiling us, seems to be surrounding us with some sort of magical experience of reality, I think quite simply that it is, because that's the soul contacting language at a very intimate level, at a very immediate level. And this happens to me when I read Shakespeare. If someone tells me, and when I teach my students Shakespeare, I tell them, you just read it. Just read it out loud. Just let it sink in. I know you don't understand it all, but feel it. Feel the rhythm. See the images, and it will do something to you. You will find that there is magic in this language, not just because it's such a clever story, but because Shakespeare was the greatest poet in the modern English language, in the early modern English language. And so this happens to me when I read Shakespeare. I find that I am enchanted. I'm reading, and all of a sudden I realize that I'm drifting away from the confines of the physical world. But again, this is not just because he tells a good story. This is because his artistic use of language is doing something to my soul that ordinary prosaic language cannot do.
Right.
It's
like
go ahead.
This was a terrible sci-fi movie. I'm sorry if anybody out there liked it, called Contact. I think Carl Sagan was one of the co-writers on it. And when the main protagonist goes into space and first makes contact with an alien world, she is speechless. And she said they should have sent a poet. That's what she just kept repeating. They should have sent a poet. That was the best line in that movie.
Interesting.
And it made perfect sense because she could not describe it using just regular scientific or just normal language.
Yeah, I think, Robert, you say something like the poetry is not, it's not like a legal document, a legal claim or a scientific laboratory experiment description, but there's something we need to test this. I think it was like, but with the one, you guys will find, Robert puts a lot of examples from Shakespeare in the notes, along with some other of the great English poets, so that you're getting a sense of being in this stream of this sound. But I think it circles back saying Shakespeare was reading the Psalms. When I've had my students do my class on the trivium, I have them do some exercises at the very beginning, reading Cato's Distichs, and there's a iambic pentameter translation of them. And one of the students once said, "Oh, if only we could all write like Shakespeare." And I'm like, "Well, this is how he learned." He learned off the distichs. He learned off the Psalms. He learned off of the texts that were actually written in this mode. And so we think of Shakespeare as having this peculiar genius and just sort of coming out with all this stuff. It's like, no, he's actually grounded in this very, very deep tradition, and it's fundamentally liturgical in the sense that it's from the Psalter.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to, because I want to hear you talking about things, I'm going to read to you, and then you all listen to the kinds of things we've been talking about. This is our first example psalm is Psalm 3, and well, I'm just going off of the things that you inspired me to think about in the footnotes, but we'll listen to it first. How heavy are mine afflictions, Lord? Many are they that rise against me. Many are they that say of my life, no safety for him in his God. But thou, O Lord, thou art my shield, my joy that lifted up my head. With my voice I call out to the Lord. He heareth me from his holy hill. I lie down and sleep and arise, because the Lord sustaineth me. I shall not fear 10,000s of men that set themselves surrounding me. Arise, O Lord, save me, my God. Thou dost smite all my foes on the cheek. Thou dost break the teeth of the wicked. Deliverance is of the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy Theod. Things that you hear in that when I read it. You talk in your notes about joy in the people, and we've talked about the Theod, the people, joy. Joy.
That's kind of one of the maybe bolder moves in this translation, but I use joy in this translation where other translations would use glory. And I did not, this wasn't like my master plan when I started doing this. I discovered that this is precisely what medieval translators did at a certain portion of English language history, because in Old English, there was a word that was used to translate Gloria in Latin, and that was vulnura. And that word fell out of use in English in the Middle English period. And there was a delay between the loss of vulnura and the entry of glory, the anglicized version of Latin gloria or French gloire. And the translators or the Christians of whatever type who were doing writing needed something to express the concept of glory. There wasn't a word that really fit in the previous sense or in the future sense. And so what did they do? The word that they chose was joy. And you can find documents from a certain period during the Middle Ages, when English documents in which the concept of glory was expressed using the word joy. And to me, this is something that does not need to end just because we now have a Latinate word that we've used to translate the Latin concept of glory or the equivalent Greek concept or the equivalent Hebrew concept. Because to me, this is a way of understanding what glory is. A way of understanding what glory is the joy of God, which is why medieval translators, medieval writers used it, is to imagine God being joyful is in a way to imagine what glory feels like for those who are around him. And I think that we need more joy in our world. I think that one of the great tragedies of postmodern life is that we have forgotten what joy is. And I think many people are actually afraid of it. I think I've known many people who are afraid to be joyful, are afraid to feel the emotion that most closely connects us to the experience of the blessed in heaven. And so I chose to retain that word on many occasions. One, because I think that in many ways it is accurate. And two, because we need more reminders that joy is a fundamental facet of the Christian experience. And if we don't recover it, I don't know that there's much hope for really recovering the vigor of the Christian religion, because joy is essential to Christianity, and we're losing it too quickly.
I'm going to sound like Tucker Carlson at this point. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Period. No, listen to too much him right now. That you found my syllabus. You'll have found my homepage and saying why I studied the Middle Ages, joy. And I had never expressed it at that level. Just saying that this is when people say it's like, what are the Middle Ages like? And it's like the slander of the Enlightenment, saying, oh, the Dark Ages, right? Is this horrific nonsense of actually by the Enlightenment they're snuffing it out. They're snuffing out all of the things that I know from simply my study of medieval literature, not at the level that you're doing it, but of the commentaries and the prayers and the Psalms and the art, and just how can you feel anything but joy in this world? And it's one of the things you've been doing in your on your Substack is talking about color, the different we stole some from you already. Thinking about
Please.
green
Yeah.
and blue and things like that. We're right now obsessed with Spike Bucklow, who I think you should find if you don't know his work yet. He's a paint conservator in Cambridge, and he's written books on the alchemy of the pigments, which is at the alchemical level, all of the layers of the material and spiritual significance of the colors, but also like how the artists themselves do not think of these colors simply as hues that you buy in a like that you I don't know, just like an aesthetic problem. It's a material problem of being in that, and I would have said glory, but it's in the joy of the physical world that shows forth God's beauty. So that you've managed, in just by choosing to say my joy that lifted up my head. And also you had some meditation on shield in one of the other psalms, so I think I was going to get to in 17, right? But this one also has, oh Lord, thou art my shield, my joy. This incredible, powerful protection, but also jubilation in God.
Yes. Now the Psalms are so full of fear and suffering and this sense that enemies are all around. And yet at the same time, they're so full of joy, so full of celebration, so full of this sense that God is the ultimate victor. And I find that extraordinary, especially considering that these were composed. I mean, they're under the inspiration of the Holy Ghost, but still they're composed before the arrival of the Messiah, before the arrival of the Redeemer. And yet still these pre-Christian Hebrew poets had this sense that despite the fact that maybe right now there's some Canaanite or whatever trying to break down my door and kill me, like still God is good and the world is beautiful and it's worth it to be joyful. That paradox to me is simply sublime.
Well, they had hope.
It did.
Well, and they also have, I mean, I'm a big fan of Tolkien as well. And when you're talking about the enchantment and the singing of the Psalms, that's what I've argued is going on in the Tom Bombadil scene. That he can't stop singing. And when he sings to them, he tells them the story of creation. And then they find themselves enchanted, actual word that Tolkien used, that they're in the song. They find themselves as if they're in this rain of cleansing joy that Tom Bombadil has brought them into. But that Tolkien also understood he's writing a pre-Christian story, but within our creation. So the joy comes through insofar as you're attentive to the creatures in the artifact. Well, so we might there, but still have some difficulties. And this was Psalm 12. I may or may not use all the ones I told you I was going to use, but we'll keep going.
Do you think?
Well, I don't know. It depends on how deep people go. I will say our chat is full but very quiet tonight. You guys, if you have questions, you should start asking them. No, they are. They're mesmerized tonight.
I think they're just worried that I'm
I think
just
they are.
crazy, and they don't want to get me
No,
going on
no,
some
no,
weird
not our.
magical project.
You're not crazy. They're absorbing all of this. Trust me. Okay, this is Psalm 12. Am I reading okay? Is this? It's a good test of whether or not I stumble over them, right?
No, it's very good. When I'm working with my kids, when we're praying with my kids, I'm always trying to encourage them to be a little bit more metrical,
More metrical. Okay. Okay.
So and it's not always easy, because I mean this is variable length, iambic meter. It's not as regular as I would like it to be, because I'm restricted by the attempt to translate faithfully. But I do try. I lean a little bit more into the meter when I can, because I like to bring out the musical dimension of this, especially when I'm praying in a group.
Okay, I'm going to get you to read some of them eventually, but right now I'll do it. Okay. And this is different from Shakespeare, because much of Shakespeare is in iambic pentameter, and that we've been practicing in iambic pentameter. I expect a certain number of beats per line, so it is different. And also I'll say, to Robert's credit, everyone, that I do not feel like you're wrestling. I mean, it's like you're not wrestling these lines to the ground to make sure that they fit in the meter. It feels like it should, right? It's just part of the sound. It's so success.
Yeah, I learned from Shakespeare never to be too mechanical with your meter.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Okay. So this one's Psalm 12. How long, forever, shalt thou forget me, and turn, O Lord, thy face from me? How long shall my soul worry by night? How long shall my heart sorrow by day? How long shall my foe be raised above me? Look and hear me, O Lord my God. Give thou light unto mine eyes, lest any time I sleep in death, lest any time mine enemies say, over him gained I the mastery. If I fall, they rejoice that vex me, yet in thy mercy I have hoped. My heart hath joy in thy salvation. I sing to the Lord who doth good to me. I sing to the name of the Lord Most High. So the note you had on this one was about psychology. And
It was.
yes, which I think the thing is, what I did actually, one, I'm going by your notes, but two, I'm going through the ways in which you're actually in the notes. And I should say this about the notes, that reading, so you sit down, you're going to read the Psalms in translation. If you made a very wise choice of not putting all this note stuff at the beginning in the introduction, right? That it rises out of the reading of the Psalms. It's very like a medieval commentary in the sense that you have, here's the text, and for the Mosaic Ark people, it's very like McLuhan's insistence that you're reading in the Mosaic, that you read and here this passage comes, and it brings up this idea, and now we're thinking about that, and then we move to this other psalm, and now we're thinking about that, but it's all there, so that I would say what Robert quoted from me, which is, the Psalms were at the heart of medieval Christian life and thought. Monks chanted them daily in the divine office. Lay people recited them in the offices of the Virgin Mary and the dead. Children learned them as the basis of their ABCs. Exegetes meditated upon them in commentaries. Artists illuminated them in manuscript, and composers drew upon them for their chants. More than any other book of the Bible, the Psalms provided the language and imagery for speaking about God and his mother and their relationship to the human soul. In the Psalms were read not only praise, prayer, and confession, but the whole matter of the incarnation, passion, resurrection, and ascension of the Word of God. That was me. That medieval Christians read the Psalms and they find everything in them. And to say that to people now, I think they're just stumbling blocks. They're the varieties of stumbling blocks over whether or not they're beautiful. How do you think of poetry? We worried about whether they're too archaic or whether they're too contemporary. But it seemed to me that in your presentation of the Psalms as something that then you read, you meditate on, it brings up varieties of responses, and it's going to change. John Cassian says that when you're reading them, you take on the voice of the author, if you read them enough, right? That you become the author of the Psalms yourself, but they're always going to be sparking new understanding every time you repeat them and every time you read them, which um, then you're reflecting here on how much does this actually apply, right? We can say the medieval Christians think it applies to everything in their life. How do we experience them?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's important to understand how inexhaustible these texts are, and maybe some people will find this shocking, but it, really, it was modern literary scholarship that really, not that these were new ideas, but the work of you know post-structuralists or people like this who have a bad reputation in our circles. They nonetheless helped me to understand the incredible capaciousness of a poetic text. They really help me to understand that a poetic text is inexhaustible. And somewhat ironically, perhaps, I think that medieval people understood this even just intuitively, even people who were not necessarily scholarly in the way that the commentators were and the theologians were. I think they still intuitively understood what kind of Parisian intellectuals started writing about many centuries later, which is that you just never really reach the bottom
Right. Do you know
of a rich poetic text.
Bruce Holsinger's book?
I don't think so.
Oh, you'll love it. So it's the pre-modern condition, and it's about those French theorists. Roland Barthes and his
Oh
polysemie.
yeah.
Roland
Oh
Barthes
yeah.
and his polysemie.
Yeah.
Guess where he got that idea? It's great. Henri de Lubac. He was reading.
Really?
Yes. The French structuralists didn't find it on their own. They were reading medieval scholarship, and Barthes.
Really?
Yes. Isn't that great? You can tell this to your committee. No, and Bruce, my colleague, he and I were both students of Caroline at Columbia, right? So we co-edited her Festschrift on the history in the comic mode, right? This is one of the comic moments that Barthes was reading Exégèse médiévale. He was reading medieval exegesis, and he got from de Lubac's description of the way medieval exegetes read the scriptures as inexhaustible, straight up. And then Barthes turns that into a modern literary critical term, but it's straight out of the medieval tradition.
Fascinating. And when you can see it, when you look at, when you
I
actually
love
read.
that. I love that. It's like you think, oh, these French these post-structuralists, they find all these clever things in text. It's like, yes, because they read the medieval,
Because they read the medieval.
because they read the
And
medievals.
when you actually engage with these medieval commentaries, I was just looking at Gregory the Great's Moralia and Job, because I just wrote an article about the book of Job, and you look at this thing and you think he could write until the end of time on the book of Job. He understands that this text is inexhaustible in a way that I think what was not really recognized until, as you just pointed out, the postmodern scholars rediscovered medieval wisdom and started publishing it in fancy academic journals or something.
But they stripped off. I mean, it's like Bruce was able to show it, like that they're all trained as medievalists, or they have medievalist friends, or they're reading it. But it's somehow it's another of these great fantasies that, oh, modernity finds all of this complexity. It's like, no, what modernity did was pretend that it was figuring all this stuff out, and it's actually on medieval roots.
It's rediscovery.
Yeah. Oh, and Gregory has that wonderful image of it's at the beginning in Moralia, where saying scripture it's so deep that an elephant could float in it, but a lamb could walk across. Right? It's like the floating elephants, right? And there's like the
Kind of a strange image, but I mean it's profound.
Yeah. So it's inexhaustible. But in this psalm, you were particularly thinking about how far I thought of this because you were saying it's like the original authors of the Psalms, the Holy Spirit, but the people in their situation are able to find hope in the midst of these incredible trials, right? The psalmist is often complaining about enemies and oppression and worrying by night, the vexation of struggling with our, you say the psalmist expression here, quite difficult to translate, suggests struggling with one's thoughts and brooding over failed or potentially futile plans. Just a lot of people haven't been able to sleep very much in the last few days.
But
Um,
that's kind of what I was bringing out there, is that when you kind of look past some of the maybe excessively archaic or stilted language that you find in a lot of old
right.
translations, you start to see how deeply human these things are. And that was a big objective of mine with this translation. Now, we've been talking about using medieval language and sort of medievalizing style and things like that, but if you actually, if someone reads these translations, they'll see that in fact they're overall much more comprehensible and natural than the King James translations or the Geneva Bible
Yeah.
translations or the Dewey Rheims translations. And that's by design, because though I wanted to have this sort of medieval aesthetic flair, this sort of medieval energy that wells up from the words and the sentence structures, I also wanted to clearly convey that the people who wrote the Psalms were humans like us.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's no reason why we should feel psychologically distant, psychologically remote from their experiences, because though the accidents have changed, the substance of their experience is eternal, it's everlasting. And it makes me very unhappy when I read a psalm translation. Now, of course, I don't like the idea of these pedestrian translations that try to make everything read as though it's a newspaper article or something. But at the same time, when the language is so archaic and so stilted that it starts to feel like the people who wrote the Psalms belong to a different species, now I'm upset. This is when I get upset, because people read these things and they think, well, this has nothing to do with me. And in fact, it has everything to do with me.
They're very emotional, and they're very relatable emotions, to read your translation of it. Now, I obviously not academic, so I'm enjoying listening to this. I don't have a lot to add except this, that I'm 57 years old, and as a Catholic, I've seen lots of translations and retranslations of certain parts of the Mass, including the Psalms. And the accessible language seems to be a language that is just stripped down to its bare bones, so that, you know, the lowest common denominator of somebody who's paying attention, right? A lot of people don't pay attention, will get it without having to put much thought into it. And that's a real shame, because they're being
Yeah,
robbed.
I think
I
that
think it's
is
sad.
definitely sad, and frankly, it's just dishonest, because if you read a few Psalms and they're all really really easy to understand, then you're not reading the Psalms, because they're just not that easy to understand. They don't read like a blog post. They don't read like a newspaper article. And when
Right.
we try to give the impression that they maybe can, if you just translate it the right way,
Right.
we really are sending a wrong message to people. We're sending the message that these ancient texts are sort of as neat and tidy as the language that we use in mass media in the 21st century.
Right. And that's mass media. Perfectly stated. That is what they're going for. Um, they have such low expectations of
Yeah,
people, and that also makes me sad, because I think most people are very smart and capable of learning these things, just by hearing it, even in the Mass once a week. They
I
can
mean,
learn a lot, and they deserve a good translation of
nowadays,
it.
many highly educated people struggle to read a Shakespeare play and really make sense of it. When these plays were being performed in England in the 16th and 17th century, the yard, the middle portion of the theater, was filled with ordinary people who paid one penny to see the play. And they
Right.
didn't even have a text in front of them. They didn't have a printed text in front of them. So we should not underestimate even the common man's ability to comprehend and benefit from and be enriched by profoundly poetic language.
Well, my contention
Absolutely.
is of course everybody in the Middle Ages knew the Psalms. Um, Certainly, if they could read, they knew. As I've said this in my Mary in the Art of Prayer, if they could read, they knew the Marian Office, because it was the Marian Office they used to learn to read. It's like like if you learn to read, you learned by reading the Psalms, and so medieval Christians fundamentally have this basis. As I've been repeating myself, they have this basis in this kind of language, and in this what Bart had to make into this complex elusive postmodern claim that, if a text reads itself or has ripple effects on how many different layers of meaning it can have. It's like, well, I mean, Calvin put it in the sense of the whole, the scriptures read themselves, which then of course everybody misunderstands and think, oh, sola scriptura. No, it's not sola scriptura. It's this resonance that once you've been saying that, you've been singing the text, saying the text, hearing the text, they layer into your life. So that it's not something that you hear once and know. It's something you hear over and over and over again. And then you go to a play, and the playwright's writing in that, literally in that meter, in that mode. You're used to hearing references and allusions and images and metaphors. You're trained from it. And I like that you've reiterated several times that you use this translation with your children. Yes, children can get this. Children love, I mean, we've talked about this for writing our children's book, Aurora Borealis, that, you don't use the simplest, vocabulary you use the richest vocabulary you can, and then invite them into puzzling over what, sauropods are, not sauropods. What are seals? We figured out what those were. Now I don't remember. Anyway, we've forgotten the vocabulary.
This is outside of my domain. I'm not. Don't know what a sauropod is.
But very good. But this is the thing that we're trying to find the part to fit in the meter and the rhyme. We had to find the perfect words, and then you end up learning lots of vocabulary. But that it's meaningful in the context in which the whole world fits in this pattern. How about monsters? Here, you've been thinking about Job and Leviathan. What about this monster? This is from Psalm 88, which I'll read some of, not the whole thing. Oh, it's a long psalm. Okay. The heavens confess thy wonders, Lord, thy faithfulness in the covenant of the saints, the covenant of saints. For who in the sky is compared to the Lord? Who shall be like unto the Lord among the sons of God? God, he that inspireth awe amidst the council of the saints, feared above all around him. Lord God of hosts, who is like to thee? Thou art the mighty one, O Lord, and thy truth surroundeth thee. Thou dost rule the raging sea. Its waves arise, and thou dost still them. It was thou that utterly vanquished Rahab, which was left as slain. Thou with thine arm of strength, thou didst scatter thine enemies. Thine are the heavens, thine is the earth, thou indeed hast founded the world. Thou hast made all things therein, hast created north and south. Tabor and Kerman rejoice in thy name. Thine arm with might, strong thy hand, and thy right hand exalted. What's Rahab? This is a good footnote. It's a sea monster. There's monsters in the Psalms. We love this in the Dragon Common Room, because that's why we're called the Dragon Common Room, because the dragons are in the Psalms singing praises to God. But there are also monsters in the Psalms that he defeats, and this being, of course, another of the great points of the Psalms. That's where all the mythology is hiding, right? Oh, the Greeks, they have their cool monster slayers, and Hercules and Pegasus. Who rides Pegasus? Perseus, and he gets to defeat the Medusa and such. The Lord defeats a lot of monsters too.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful the way that the Hebrew poets incorporated some of these mythological ideas, and maybe Christians think that this should make us uncomfortable or something, but that's part of why I try through my commentary to sort of weave the Psalms into the larger literary experience of the human race, because they were immersed, the writers, the Hebrews, as a people, as a culture, they were immersed in the literary, mythological environment of their world, of their portion of the world. And by incorporating these sort of mythological ideas into the Psalms, they're doing something that they couldn't do if they just ignored it, if they just said these are false, they don't exist, let's make it disappear. Instead, they're bringing this into the Psalms, and then doing what? They're making it into something that gives all the more glory to God. Instead of rejecting this literary mode, they're saying this literary mode can also serve its purpose in glorifying the God of Israel, in glorifying the God who has conquered all the monsters that the other peoples fear.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, I maybe say even more strongly than you have. There is a character of the Lord in the Psalms that if you just read the Bible, he's acting in relationship to the Israelites, and so you see his power in those terms. But we don't actually have that many stories about who they think the Lord is. He makes everything his Genesis, but the interactions with he doesn't have a portrait except in the Psalms, and this is one of my own. I mean, maybe it's a hobby or a hobby horse that I'm riding, that we don't see who Christ is because we don't pay proper attention to who the Lord is and the way in which he appears in the Psalms. So as to say things like, which you point to in your notes quite regularly, the Psalms are pointing to Christ, but that means that Christ is something that I think a lot of modern Christians have completely lost sight of because they're so focused on the historical Jesus, and they're so focused on him as a particular kind of human biography, right? All of the projects from the 19th century are to find, exactly how historically accurate the Gospels are as sources, and forgetting that medieval Christians read the Psalms as about Christ, and that makes Christ the great monster slayer.
Oh, yeah, he's our baby.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what Gregory's doing in Morality and Job, right? It's all about Christ,
It's all
and
about Christ.
there's the two great monsters in Job, are the behemoth and Leviathan, right? The sea monster and the fire breathing dragon. So with last week at BaseCon, I was giving a talk on Beowulf. We have in Beowulf the image of he's the monster fighter, right? He fights Grendel, he fights Grendel's mother, he fights the dragon. And that's the kind of hero that I think, for better or for worse, people imagine now as, how to say this? Well, whatever Kash Patel was talking about seeing people in Valhalla was a little bit off on the mythology right now.
Oh, poor man
That
is getting excited
well
for that.
no, but it's an interesting problem for Christians because we've lost sight of the divinity, and the divinity's there in the Psalms, but it has a power and a character and a specificity that medieval Christians understood. They painted it in every apse mosaic they painted in every apse that they portrayed Christ in majesty in, but we don't see it anymore. We just see him as a human being with a life story, and the movie always stops at the crucifixion, and you don't really see what happens in heaven. Does that make sense?
I think yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And I absolutely. And I think it's dangerous to kind of think of, the Gospels as like the beginning and end of the story
Right.
of Christ.
Right.
The story of Christ begins in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And he was aware of that. Of course, he was God, but also he was aware that he was talking to people and interacting with people whose minds were formed in this literary mode of the Hebrew Bible. So even when he was walking on the earth and speaking to men, he knew that his identity was more than what people saw and heard. He knew that his identity was also a literary experience, that it was something flowing from all these years and all these different books that were engaging literary modes of expression and literary modes of thought and literary modes of perceiving reality. So Christ, the gospel accounts of Christ's life are like the fulfillment of this long literary experience that had already prepared the minds of the people that he was speaking to understand fully who he was. And just as you said now, with this sort of obsessive historiographical textual critical idea about like who was Jesus, like, well, Jesus, to even use that word, to use that name, starts to imply something that I find problematic. As you said, this is the Lord. The psalmist talks about Christ, but doesn't use his given name, because this is a character, as you said, that takes shape in the Psalms. And this character is so much larger than something that happens at one historical moment in one historical place. And again, this is mediated through literature. This is mediated through literary experience. It's true. The ancient Hebrews didn't read novels like we do now. We imagine ourselves to be a very literary culture because everyone reads novels. They were far,
Well, that's the
far more
19th
literary.
century. The 19th century read
That,
novel.
yeah,
The
yeah. I was
20th,
just
the
right.
Bring
Maybe,
it
20th,
back.
the
I guess
20th. Yeah, it's like it's a particular the media moment that we're in. Marshall McLuhan has told us that we're the digital. Well, he didn't say this, but our friend Mark Stallman says through Marshall McLuhan, the digital retrieves the medieval. So in this digital mosaic mode, we're finally able to figure out what Bart and de Lubac were talking about in this sort of polysemy. But you said something in this. It's cruel to make you remember your own footnotes. I don't remember mine. Why would I?
it's been a while since I wrote this.
They're very good. I'll read them back to you. You say Psalm 88 has a fairly strong mythological character, and I agree, as do other portions of the Psalter and of the Hebrew Bible more generally. And we need have no misgivings about this. Rather, we should celebrate it, for myth is one of humanity's most treasured literary genres, and has long been a means of conveying transformative truths through captivating stories and deeply pleasing poetry. And then you cited Aristotle, and I didn't know Aristotle said this. You've made me like Aristotle better today. And as Aristotle wrote in the Metaphysics, quote, "The lover of myth is in a sense a lover of wisdom, for myth is composed of wonders." Which goes back to our
Right.
joy, right? The Vulder and the
Yeah.
joy and the wonder that the Jesus of history is only makes sense fully if you intersect him with the mythology. I mean, history maybe this way, and mythology is this, that the mystery of the incarnation is that somehow that magnificence of the whole mythological reality, the wonder of the creation whose joy we've been describing, somehow through this, and the internet gives us such amazing metaphor for this, through this like fiber of light, somehow enters into Mary and becomes, Jesus walking among us, but speaking out of that connection with the whole of reality. And somehow the Psalms are also able to show us that reality.
I think they show us that reality in a way that nothing else can. There are certainly multiple reasons for the centrality of the Psalms in Christian spirituality over the centuries, but to a certain extent, I feel like you can almost boil it down to the fact that they give an insight into the essence of the spiritual life in a way that nothing else does.
I agree. And this is this is the one that I was thinking about with shield. And let me see, Psalm 17. You realize I was also choosing these as a part of our prayer for Charlie tonight, because I think if we have Christians need strength, they're in the Psalms. I mean, the medieval monastic tradition is all about, you say the Psalms because this is our shield against the
Yes.
demons. And
Yes.
I've been thinking in the last few days how, I mean, you can hear that as a kind of metaphor or a psychological reality, which I think it is, but I think it's also quite literally the shield that we need against the forces of darkness that are coming against us. In my pain, I invoked the Lord, and I cried out unto my God. He heard my voice from his sanctuary. My cry and his sight came to his ears. The earth is moved, and it is shaken. Roots of mountains quake and tremble, for he was wroth to them. His ire smoke ariseth. In his face a fire burneth. In him coals are set alight. He bent the heavens, and downward came heavy darkness under his feet. Upon the cherubim he flew, swiftly flew on wings of the winds. Darkness he made his secret place, his pavilion that encircled him. Murk water there was, and clouds of air, full shining clouds passed in his sight, hail and coals of fire. And the Lord doth thunder from heaven, and the highest giveth his voice. Hail and coals of fire. He sent his arrows and scattered them. He sent much lightning and routed them, and the rivers of waters were seen, the foundaments of earth revealed. From thy wrathful speech, O Lord, the breath and tempest of thine ire. I don't think people tend to think, oh, and that's Jesus, as much as we should.
As much as we should.
And so I've written in Marrying the Art of Prayer when I'm meditating on the Psalms that are in the Marian office, because the problem with everybody's always freaking out about Mary. She's, oh, if you pay attention to Mary, you don't see God anymore. It's like, no, if you don't pay attention to Mary, you don't see God, because you don't see the horror and the mystery and the wonder of the incarnation, to say that the Lord, who we hear described in the Psalms, entered through her into our life. And I forgot what I was thinking there. And that in the Psalms that are chosen for the Marian office specifically, it's a lot of this, it's a throne imagery, that he's enthroned on the cherubim. You have this in darkness. He made his secret place, his pavilion that encircled him. I mean, she's the pavilion that he's inside when he becomes incarnate in her womb. So this is the Lord established in the heavens. She becomes the heavens, and all of this mystery of incarnation is not available as a mystery if you're not fully immersed in who the Lord is through this kind of language.
Yeah, and we can see that these things, these ideas, these images, these profound relationships between different types of literary experience in the Hebrew Bible, like these are not expressed clearly in the gospel. And I love reading the gospels. I absolutely love reading the gospels. But the gospel authors are not trying to do what has already been done. They are expecting us to know Christ in this more sort of historical and theological sense that we have in the gospel, but they are also expecting us to know Christ as he is made known in the Psalms. So there's an essential quality here, and I think we're not only missing something if we don't experience Christ and some of these, even these Marian allusions in the Psalms. We're not only missing something, we're missing something that we were intended to have as a necessary complement to the more historical narrative that we get in the Gospels.
Exactly. The Gospels assume you know all of this. It's talk about the backstory that you have to have in your mind to then understand why they get so angry at Jesus for saying he's the Lord.
Yeah, and that
Son
was
of God. It's like, who's that? Right? Oh, it's a superhero. It's a especially powerful guy, right? No, it's the Lord, the Creator. And that wonder and horror of his crucifixion isn't available. And so I'm obsessing right now, been obsessing on the Franciscans for the past year, but this summer I gave a talk in Italy on Francis's image of Christ that he develops in his Office of the Passion, which is all the Psalms. And if you think of St. Francis primarily as focused on the crucified, right, because he gets the stigmata and he's imitating Christ in his suffering, which I did in the first paper that I wrote on this office, you miss the point of what it is. It's saying, this is the Lord of the Psalms. He speaks to us through the Psalms of his suffering, but he also shows us his glory. And you don't understand the sort of tremendousness of who it is we are praising unless you see both.
Unless you see both, yeah. And the third epigraph that I use in this book is one of my favorite passages from the entire Bible. For it is need that all things be fulfilled that are written in the law of Moses and in the prophets and in the Psalms of me referring to Christ.
Right.
And I just find that absolutely captivating and thrilling, that the Lord himself specified unambiguously, unequivocally, that the Psalms are written about him.
Right.
And what are we doing in the church if we are not devoting ourselves to praying and studying and immersing our minds in the Psalms and in the poetic portions of the prophetic books, when our Lord himself declared that they spoke of him? I find this is you hear me starting to get a little bit of negativity in my voice, because I find this very.
I hear you may be frustrated. People skip
you're
bits.
hearing a little bit of frustration, because that this is not emphasized. This is not preached upon as it should be. That this is our Lord Himself saying, "Do you want to know me? Well, you will find me in the Psalms." And yet we don't have this unified voice coming from church leaders and theologians and whatnot telling us we need to find a better way to integrate the Psalms into our life.
Well, it's also the irony of the Psalms for the I was saying the medieval Christians used the Psalms, the Psalter or the Marian Office to learn to read. So, and they learned to read in order to be able to read the Psalms. I mean, Saint Francis was not a great literary scholar of any sort, right? If he knows all of these things about Christ in the Psalms, it's because he learned the Psalms. And I have other ways that I know he's using them, like the images in the Psalters, but that. Oh, I keep forgetting what I was saying. That they're in the office, and they say the office and the mass, and you need the two together. It's like there's focus now on make sure to go to mass. We have our obligation to go to mass and things like that. But when I've been giving talks or presentations on the image of Mary that is carried in the Psalms, and modern Catholics haven't heard this. And I'm it's like I've come out of the Middle Ages and I think, oh, it's all there, we're in the Catholic Church now. And of course it is if you go to Rome, and it's all there, and all the mosaics and all of the references are all there in the art. But it's I mean, I'm relying on those of you who've been Catholic longer than I have to say, where'd it go, right? And I'm hearing that it wasn't there necessarily pre-Vatican II, which is why they were trying to make the liturgy more appealing and reformed. People like de Lubac were writing medieval exegesis in his 4 volumes to try to get people back into this medieval commentary tradition. How did we not get it? I find that sort of frustrating and puzzling, because there's lots of new scholarship now in medieval studies, in all of our translations. It's like, how have we not managed to integrate this medieval appreciation of Christianity into modern Catholicism?
I wish I had an answer to that. I think
I don't know. I don't get it.
as you can probably see, this is part of what I try to do in my Substack, but
Right.
I think that there's still a lot of fear. I think that there's still a lot of fear about what the Middle Ages really was. I think, and I don't idealize the Middle Ages in my Substack. I'm a very sober-minded type of guy, very Germanic, and not given to flights of fancy. And but nonetheless, I mean, I can't deny, when I'm being sober-minded and scholarly about the Middle Ages, I can't deny that this is an age that we do not need to fear. This is a culture that we do not need to shy away from, because for whatever imperfections it had, as all cultures have imperfections, there is so much here that can be directly integrated. I mean, it has to be modified a little bit for the modern context, but this is something that we can integrate directly into our lives. And I don't think we need to be afraid of that in the way that, at least subconsciously, modern culture still is afraid.
Yes, because it's become an insult in academic circles and in regular life. It's so medieval.
Exactly.
Your ideas are so medieval, and it's always something negative.
There's still so much negativity surrounding, and I think even people who don't maybe consciously subscribe to the negative stereotypes are still strongly affected by this.
Yes.
And I'm trying to do my little part to help people overcome this, to try to just melt away this this negativity that surrounds medieval culture. I mean, sure, we can reject aspects of it that we think are truly harmful, especially in the modern context, but there's so much left after you do that could enrich our lives, and we're not really making an attempt.
Well, one of the positive things I've seen in that direction is these memes going around, making its way around the socials mostly I've seen it over the past year, showing these beautiful cathedrals. It's here's an example of the Dark Ages, and it's of course mockery of the idea that these were Dark Ages that built these, or why can't we build beautiful things like this anymore? So, well, you can, but belief was what was fueling it. And so people are discussing these medieval concepts now in popular culture, which I think is wonderful. Let's see more of it.
it wasn't just architectural expertise that enabled those cathedrals to come into existence. The true
Right.
source of it was their faith and their culture.
Mhm.
And if we want to create beautiful things again, well, then we need more than just expertise in mathematical relationships or some such thing. We need to recover the cultural experience that surrounded Christianity in the Middle Ages.
Mhm.
Well, I think what you're saying that people are afraid. You're actually a little more vigorous in your Substack than you're letting on.
That could be true.
in, in terms of how the failures of modernity. Maybe the Middle Ages aren't perfect, but you're quite clear on how modernity has fallen on hard times.
It's true. I get pretty harsh about
You
that.
do, but I think what people are being constantly warned off of seeing in the Middle Ages is precisely what we're talking about right now, the Lord. It was interesting for me working on this paper on Francis, and I'm saying, okay, so he's describing himself in he describes himself as the herald of the great king, right? It's like, oh, who is this great king? How would he know what it is? And I'm always wondering about, when I'm working as a historian, it's like, how would people know things? How would Francis know that the Christ is the voice of the Psalms? Oh, well, because the Psalters were like rubricated so they'd know, right? If you learn to read from reading a Psalter, you don't just have the text, you have Vox Christi on and it's very, I did this paper I did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and then published about 10 years ago. Um, he, he's not using the liturgical Psalter so much as he's using the actual rubrics that would show up. And so he picks from the Psalms that just said voice of Christ. And Francis, being Francis, says, great, that's the voice of Christ. That's what he
Yeah.
said. So
Yeah.
it's Psalm 6, it's Psalm 21, it's Psalm 68. You get all of the incredible first person accounts of the crucifixion in those Psalms. And Francis embodied those. But then he's describing himself as herald of the great king. Who's this great king? And I think to myself, oh, well, I better look at, like what monuments might he have seen? And suddenly I find Italy, where he's from, is filled with mosaic apse paintings, mosaics of Christ in majesty, which
Christ in majesty.
I'd never seen. Right?
Hmm.
I've been a medievalist for decades and decades and decades, and you see lots of pictures of Gothic architecture. You see, images of this, that, and the other. And I was thinking, how has the fact that the Christ in majesty is the single most prominent image of Christ in the Middle Ages been completely erased from our consciousness? It's literally everywhere. I couldn't stop finding it. And then I realized we're never looking up. We're never looking at the apses. Unfortunately, some of the Roman churches have them covered with baldaquinos and things like that, so you don't see them. But the thing that I think we're being diverted from seeing is the Lord. I think we don't read the Psalms, and we don't, because the Enlightenment is so determined to make sure that we think of him as only a man.
Yeah, the historical Christ.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of my journey into this world of psalmic literature is my own attempt to build my faith around the literary Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Which maybe sounds bad. That sounds like I'm saying Christ is a fictional character or something, but of course that's not the case. When I say the literary Christ, I mean the Christ that emerges from this extraordinary body of literature that we've received from Hebrew culture, from the inspiration of the Holy Ghost, from the New Testament authors, and I would say above all in the Old Testament from the Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I mean, this idea of the Lord, I think I mentioned that in one of my notes in the Psalms. Like, we need to remember that this word Lord was just a word. This was not a name for God. This was not a name for Christ. This was a word borrowed from ordinary life in Hebrew as in English. The Lord is the master. The
Mm-hmm.
Lord is the powerful man who is governing the community, or who requires your obedience, or who requires your submission, your support in a military campaign or something like this. When they refer to God as the Lord, this is making a statement about who God is, or about who Christ is, and about what his role is in human life. I fear that in modern English and among modern Catholics, the word Lord has kind of lost all of its vigor
Hmm.
because we think of it as a purely religious term. But if we could take ourselves back to the feudal culture of the Middle Ages, which I try to do in my Substack from time to time, we could get a feeling for what what a lord was in the cultural, sociological sense. And this would actually enrich our experience of Christ as the Lord because it gives us a clearer idea of what he means in the life of mankind. Because that's where this term came from, was the role of the Lord, the secular Lord, the sociological Lord, in the life of mankind.
I think that must be very difficult for modern people to grasp, at least modern Americans. Maybe it's more easier for British people because they're used to those titles still existing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it still has meaning culturally for them. Master is a little more difficult here because of the history of the Civil War. But how how would you explain it to an American in particular? That Lord, just how would you impress upon them the importance and the significance of that particular title? Because I think it was significant when they were using it.
Well, in abbreviated form, I would try to evoke a little bit of the sociological experience of people who lived in feudal cultures, mostly in the early Middle Ages. And I would say one thing first. I would talk about Old English poetry and the way that Old English poetry portrayed people as so downcast, so lost when they could not be with their Lord.
Mm.
The Lord was not someone who just made rules and went around bullying people. It wasn't that at all. The Lord was someone who gave meaning to the life of someone who was not that high in the social hierarchy. And in Old English literature, what we see is not some sort of like French Revolution. I cast off my Lord and now I'm finally free and I can self-actualize. It was
Yeah, right.
it was, I've lost my Lord. Who am I? Where do I go? Why am I
Nice.
alive? It's
Right.
so profound when you read this literature, the way that they reacted to, the way that they interacted with, the way that they perceived their feudal lord in their lives. It was such a paternal relationship. It was such a deep emotional relationship, this sense
Mm.
of loyalty unto death, this sense of I am alive so that I can serve my Lord and be a part of this community. So I would talk about that. Then I would say one more thing. I would say what the origin of the word Lord is. The origin of the word Lord in English comes from words in Old English that mean he who provides the loaves,
Mm.
he who is guardian of the bread. Basically, that's the origin of the word Lord in English. This is not a word that refers to the big bully in town who has the biggest castle and can go around taking advantage of peasants. This is a word referring to someone who was responsible for caring for the community because he was the most powerful, because he was the most socially stable, because he had the most military prowess or whatever. The Lord was he who guards the bread so that the community can eat. If you lived in a society like this, where this understanding of the Lord was natural, was completely normal, I think it could transform your understanding of who the celestial Lord was.
That's that's excellently stated. Thank you. I think it also matters that people are not they're not in want a lot today. And so when you say it's somebody who provides protection and provides the bread, it's kind of taken as an entitlement of every person here that well, of course the government's going to provide these things because it has. That just that's not no fault of theirs. They've just been conditioned to you can always have something like that. But if that weren't something that would actually existed and that people could reliably not starve or not be attacked by an outside force every 20 years or less, it would mean it would be much more meaningful to them, more immediately meaningful to them. So I think they can grasp it intellectually, but it's hard for them to feel it.
They're
I think
feel
in American culture, it's very hard to feel it.
well,
Yeah.
they're all feeling it right now. One of the lords was just killed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, we still feel this sense of loss when people in a certain position are taken away from us.
Well, and I think Kirk, I mean, it's interesting. We've been meditating as we do as poets on everything, and of course, his name is Church.
That's true.
Not
Yeah.
only that, his name is Charles James Church. I'm sorry, but the poetry of reality is kicking in quite powerfully. That he, I mean, so what you're describing, Robert, is the Lord as the leader who is responsible and to whom people look for their self-definition.
Yeah.
And I mean, interesting with Charlie's role as organizing, the debates in the campus communities and the fundraising and stuff like that, and that he was providing for the existence of that institution. It's
Doing it at great personal risk
and
to
as
himself.
we've seen.
Yeah.
So I would put a caution on this, though, that one of the reasons that medieval lords knew how to behave was they were reading the Psalms. and that lords simply as warlords, and this was the point of Beowulf, right? That in fact what happened when you had lords that were simply military gang leaders, you ended up with feuds that burned all the mead halls down.
Absolutely.
And so their conversion to Christianity was critical to this sense of a community that had a Lord who was modeled on Christ, who was, and therefore on the Lord of the Psalms, who was responsible, who was the fortress and the shield and the joy. And there's an image of what kind of Lord you're supposed to be, not just one who takes revenge on the neighboring village and murders everybody. And this is obviously also topical right now for all of us in the country. It's like to follow Christ is to understand this social relationship of responsibility and care, but it's more than just, oh, and now because our Lord has been killed, we're going to go kill yours, right? Because as Christ shows us, what happens if you do that is you end up with nothing but vengeance cycles.
Yeah, it's a never-ending cycle.
Never-ending cycles of vengeance. And so when if modernity has lost, is that warning. We see what people say, oh, religion is responsible for all the wars. It's like, no, religion is responsible for you realizing that isn't the right way to go. It's not the right way to go to end up caught forever in cycles of kinslaying.
Mm-hmm.
Beowulf is a good text for kind of seeing that aspect of kind of Germanic Northern European culture and the church's accomplishment in sort of Christianizing those peoples and incorporating the values of the gospel into the existing culture of Germanic Europe. This isn't what was an absolutely extraordinary accomplishment with the most momentous consequences for Western civilization, and it goes back to what you said. It's like, well, you don't just Christianize people by explaining to them theoretically what is good to do and what's not so good. Is that the Psalms are a way to make these concepts sink into your heart.
Mm-hmm.
That is so well said.
I can just imagine these Germanic warlords hearing these prayers again and again and again, and eventually it just reshapes their interior world.
Yes.
Not that they all became saints, but to the point where they could see a different vision.
Right. They would slow down. They would slow down. What I saw, well, I've been doom scrolling for days, guilty.
We're trying to drag you out of it right now.
Yeah. Well, this is relevant though, because someone was making the point, and I cannot remember this account. It's one of the bigger ones, that we had to all agree on certain civilized behaviors, and he didn't mention Christ once. And I was just reading this very long, very well thought out, and he had good intentions. This thing he was proposing, And I just thought, it's not going to work. It's not going to work without Christ. It
Well,
hasn't
because
in the
Christ
past. It's
isn't
not
an
going to work now.
abstraction. It's
Right.
not,
And
Christ isn't
yeah,
just, then this is when people say, oh, it's not just ideas, or, ideas are not enough. It's like, he's not an idea of
yeah,
justice.
right.
He is
Well,
justice.
yeah, we'll agree on
The
what's civilized.
right, but the sense of the reality of Christ as Lord, which I'm enjoying that we're getting to this, um, is that he is a person, and everybody is. We talk about being like, oh my God, it's a personal God. It's like, what does that even mean, right? I mean, they mean that they have a relationship with God, and that he has a sort of a presence, but I mean, this is that you were talking, Casey, about how we've been insulated from so much in modernity, and created this bureaucratic structure around us that doesn't have the
Mhm.
person of the Lord in it anymore, which means no sense of what it is to be human in these
Right.
relationships of dependence and power.
Our grandparents understood it because they went through the Depression. Now, if you say this to somebody, who's a teenager or younger now, maybe they'll get it if they read about it in a history class. But we're of the age where we grew up with people who they save everything. They still do. They still act like this because they remember what it was like to be hungry, and it's not a good feeling. It's a scary feeling,
Yeah.
and it's not something that they ever get over. And the people in the 1930s embraced FDR's policies because they were Christians, and they thought, well, yes, we need to share, right?
Right.
But 70, 80, 90 years later, the country is less and less and less Christian. And then what have you got left? What would you have left is entitlement. So people don't have want. They say, well, I'm entitled to food. I'm entitled to everything. And they don't ever stop to think where it's coming from, or why it's there, or what happened to make it come there. What made it, what happened to make this a common thing where they could just have everything that they need. I'm not belittling people who are in real need. There are lots of people who are in real need and they're still hungry, but nobody starves to death in this country. I think people did right after the Civil War. I think it's possible people came pretty darn close to it during the Depression,
Yeah.
and they just never got over that trauma. That's disappeared from people's memories today.
And I think in a way this is a strong argument for the importance of studying medieval culture, even for those who are not necessarily feeling a great personal interest in what happened in the 11th century in England or in France or in Spain. But if our culture has become something that insulates us from elemental realities that in turn connect us to the love of God, then I think it makes a lot of sense to at least study and try to allow the mind to enter into a different sort of culture in which these elemental realities were so deeply embedded in people's daily experience of life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thinking back to where we started with, you're saying that you tried to see
Yes,
what is
right.
it like to not know whether or not the harvest is going to have enough to keep you going through the winter. And this I talked about in the Beowulf talk last weekend too, that the mid 6th century people starved to death because the volcano sent so much, multiple volcanoes apparently sent so much ash into the air that there was like just starved. Everybody starved. It got very, very cold in the north. The Beowulf context is this, that people are dying because there's not enough food. And yes, I mean, one way your Lord takes care of you is you raid and you steal all the gold from somebody else, and you take slaves, and you burn down the other guy's meat hall so that you can hold power. But the monks singing the Psalms teach them is the Lord is a different kind of character than that one. And that's, I think, the Beowulf poet himself is Christian, and he's writing with sorrow about how this culture tended to self-destruct.
Yes.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when it's presented dramatically. It can be done very well, and you can see how heartbreaking it is that people are losing everything constantly, and you wonder how does somebody survive that trauma?
Right.
Well, I'm
It's
glad you
Christianity,
asked.
and
Right?
that's
It's
when
Christianity.
people
That's why
now. I
hope.
mean, this the sort of
Yeah.
desperate pretense that I think some people get into. It's like, oh, we're just going to like. I find people sort of hungering for war right now, which I find
Yeah.
horrible.
Because they don't know what it is. That's why.
Right. That they think, oh, well, it's either it's inevitable or it's desirable or it's necessary, and all of these things are horrors that we pray that it's interesting we say we have leaders and not lords. We pray that our leaders don't take us into, it's like, okay, am I going to follow you or not, right? Which is a different kind of image
Right.
than what we've been saying that a Lord who cares for us is going to be.
And those leaders understand that all of the people aren't necessarily loyal to them. And that can also create a lot of conflict going both ways.
I
They might
have a
not follow
last
me.
psalm for us to meditate on, which I think we've gotten to very nicely. This is 83. How lovely thy dwellings, O Lord of hosts! My soul longeth, indeed it fainteth, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh, they sing out gladness unto the living God. Even the sparrow hath found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, setting its young ones near thine altars. Lord of hosts, my King, my God, blissful are they that dwell in thy house. They shall praise thee forever. Blissful are they whose aid is of thee. There are paths in their heart. They shall pass through the vale of Baca and arrive at a spring. The rain doth fill the pools. They go from strength and unto strength and appear before God in Zion. Lord God of hosts, hear thou my prayer. Hearken, O God of Jacob. Behold, O God, thou our shield, and look on the face of thy Christ. One day in thy courts is better than the thousands. Better it is to stand at the threshold of the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of sinners. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord giveth grace and glory. No good thing shall he withhold from them that walk in innocence. O Lord of hosts, blissful the man that places trust in thee. You talked in your note here about the liturgy. Through dramatic metaphor, strong adjectives, hyperbole, and evocative imagery, the poet of Psalm 83 illustrates his fervent affection for the sacred liturgy of the temple. And
I find this psalm just kind of overwhelmingly beautiful, and it really resonates with kind of this theme you've developed about Christ as the Lord, as this sort of regal presence in the Psalms. And uh, to me, there's nothing in ancient poetry that combines these experiences or these reflections, where on the one hand you have this sort of regal presence, this kingly lordly presence, and on the other hand you have the speaker of the poem basically just expressing his infatuation with being in the presence of this Lord, or being in the presence of his temple, being in the courts of the Lord, just being physically near where he usually is found, or being physically near this place that is symbolic of his power and of his role in the community. Again, like I just find it incredibly beautiful. And what an extraordinary thing it would be if Christian spirituality in the 21st century could recover some of this longing that we hear from the psalmist, this longing to be in the courts of the Lord. This is a spiritual disposition that I think is exceedingly rare, and that's unfortunate.
well, the beautiful thing about this is there's the image of the sparrow finding the home there, and that, of course, is Bede's great image of the debate that they had in Edwin's of Northumbria's court about whether or not to convert. And there's the famous story that the one of the counselors says, well, the life that we have now in the mead hall is like the light if a bird flew in from one side and then flew out the other, and all we know is what we're in this light now. And he says it, and Bede's telling of it, if this new teaching gives us more certain knowledge about what's going on outside the mead hall, then I say we should embrace it. People despair, right? There's always like, what should we do now? How can we in this post-Christian world become Christian again? It's like, it's happened before. It happened to the Anglo-Saxons after they'd murdered all their kin and
Yep.
fled to England. So, it's not that this is a one-off, right? It's like we converted and then we failed and then we get in. It's like one. I mean, the scriptures are full of how the Israelites fall away from the Lord and He comes back for them
Absolutely.
anyway, right? It's like
Absolutely.
come back. And yes, you did it again. Fell into sin. Get back over here. Oh, right, I come. I'm Christ. I'm here for you. It's like in the presence of. Behold our God, God, thou our shield, and look on the face of thy Christ. He's doing it constantly, calling for us, and I find it, sort of sad beyond words when people say, "Well," it's as if, right? Oh, people are not going to church anymore. It's over. It's like it's not over. It's the same again. It's what we know from the scriptures we have to keep doing, which is returning.
Yeah, in fact, one of the Psalms basically recounts, one, I think more than all the others, basically recounts there's almost a hint of like comedy in it. You almost feel a sort of comic effect with the psalmist recounting how God did all these good things for the Hebrews. Oh, and then they betrayed him. And then he was merciful again. And then they fell away again. And then he gave them protection from their enemies and led them to this place. Oh, and then they sinned against him yet again.
Right.
And it almost does sound ridiculous when you're reading it, but then you realize, well, this is the story of the human race.
Right.
This is not just the story of the Hebrews. And it is, I try to be a realist, but I'm also someone who is determined to believe in joy. And if the Hebrews returned to God that many times after abandoning and betraying him, then the human race can do the same.
Amen.
Amen.
And my recipe for this recovery is always start with the Psalms. It's
The
worked
Psalms.
before.
It's worked before. Exactly.
And that it's created, that created the culture that built those cathedrals. So, this is what have we fallen away from? And I think the framing, I just talking tonight about the framing of the Psalms for the Mass is essential. That if we're just focused on, that there's the liturgy is just the Mass, you don't have all of the support, imaginary, the powerful sense of the imaginary support of the images in your head that have been taught you. I think, Robert, that we started with your talking about how you were farming and trying to live in the world, like actually the physical world, which the kid, I mean, I like that kids are all saying touch grass, get out of the internet and go back out into the world. Poetry needs the world. It's the art of perfect description, but it needs to be concrete and it from the world, and that's what we need to do. It's all there for us already.
We don't want to overemphasize. I mean, it's great to go out and become a farmer and use the scythe and make hay and all this stuff. I mean, by all means, go out in the grass, get out in the sunshine. But we also need to remember that in our kind of fallen, limited state, we do not have full access to the glories of creation. We do not have full access
Right.
to the depth of the truth and the supernatural realities that are sort of woven into the physical created world. So poetry draws us into those elemental realities in a way that most of us can't really do just by experiencing them with our senses. So we want to sort of keep that balanced perspective in mind. Yes, we absolutely need the physical world. We need the sun. We need the trees and the grass, but we also need language that helps us to gain full access to the transformative properties that we find in the created world.
You had this comment on Psalm 131. I'm not even sure what catachresis is, but anyway. Okay, right, yeah, it's part of rhetorical jargon. Despite the word catachresis, many other examples of obscure Greek or Latin sounding terminology, rhetoric comes not from Greece or Rome, but from God. He not only created language, but also taught mankind to use it dramatically and artistically, so that literature and preaching and conversation and all other forms of human discourse might fulfill their crucial and exalted role in his epic plan to ennoble our lives and save our souls. You got to get this book, everybody, and read his footnotes.
That's my
Like to
vision
learn
of
things now.
language. I'm a zealot for language. I don't
love
deny
it.
it.
Wow, we could keep going, but that we've kept you as we promised for hours and hours and hours. Do you have anything that you'd still like to say?
I think I've mostly said it.
Okay.
Whether you use my translation or another one that's equally traditional and poetic, or similarly traditional and poetic, I just really encourage people to find a way to integrate the Psalms into their daily prayer life, because I think that it's a transformative practice that is desperately needed in the 21st century.
You
Amen.
convinced me. I've never done it before, but I think it's a good idea.
Well, I use the Marian Office, and I can highly recommend that. But Robert gives some very nice small morning and evening prayer structures that include Marian devotion. So I'm happy about that.
Tended to be very approachable. I know what it's like to deal with a busy, big family and children going every which way, and so obviously more could be done, but it's just a starting point. If that's all you can do, I think that's pretty good.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your love of language and God and prayer and practice with us, and we hope you'll come back. Because I think that just so many of the things I've seen in your Substack they resonate with what we've been trying to figure out a way to show people, and it's just an absolute joy to be finding. I think one of the things I realize is that we all are, thanks to the internet, starting to find each other, and that there are those of us out here in the world trying to live in Christ, and hopefully that this will help us through the times to come, because not to say humanity's been here before, we've been here all along, and our Lord is with us too in this journey. So thank you so much for joining us, and God bless.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.